Are you aware of the revamping of textbooks by large state departments of education offices, for example Texas, that try to manipulate American history and include religious figures, for example Moses, as historical figures? If these modified textbooks became the chosen books for students in Iowa, what would your response action be?
I would be appalled. I would. This is a conversation that requires depth and rolling up our sleeves and talking about things. When religion and government start to intermingle, we have all sorts of gray areas, and it gets very, very difficult to separate the two. I have to go back to my own study and my own experience with education. Creationism is a religious answer that belongs in the religious context. It is essentially denying the science that is very clear, carbon dating, for example. So we can't intermingle religious, I'm not going to call it theory because it isn't to a creationist, but we cannot intermingle religious creationism with factual scientific theory. So if that were to become Iowa's, I would fear for the future, the stability of our intellectual future. It is not compatible. I would be quite upset to see Iowa go in that direction. It won't happen.
Mr. Danielson.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Currently in Iowa, it is the responsibility of locally elected school boards and their peers and professionals in those leadership positions to determine textbook purchases. I don't favor centralized control of the Department of Education. And so I'm not sure how they did that in Texas, but I don't think you could get away with it here in Iowa as a functional matter, as a legal matter. Now, keep in context that what's taught in the classroom, in my view, ought to be evidence-based. I like to be an evidence-based decision maker myself. And in the context of theology and religiosity, you could talk about Moses and explain that to students as a fundamental belief system. But it has to be in the context of that subject matter. Once you cross over into science, and Gary alluded to, the Big Bang Theory and creationism sort of opposed to each other, I favor science-based practices being taught in science classes and religious-based theory being taught in theological or religiosity-based subject matter. So it has to be in context. Leave to science what science does best, leave to religion what religion does best, and give the students an understanding of those two areas of knowledge and those different truths. And I think if we do that, we'll come out just fine. And recognize that people have strong opinions about those things, but it's our duty to teach our kids evidence-based practices while they're in school.